You're watching VinylicPumaGaming. What's up guys, back with another video, and today I want to talk about the Enclave from the Fallout universe and their overall absence from Fallout 4. Now, I know that hate is a pretty strong word, and perhaps Bethesda doesn't really hate the Enclave, but I did want to talk about several different things that have me worried about the Enclave's presence in future Fallout titles. The Enclave is one of the more interesting factions that first appeared in Fallout 2. They reappeared in Fallout 3, and even New Vegas featured some old members of the Enclave that managed to integrate with the local population. There are only two instances we get to hear about the Enclave in Fallout 4. The first is in a terminal entry on the Prydwen, where Proctor QUINLAN simply says the Brotherhood defeated the Enclave. The second is during the Far Harbor DLC, when the player gets to speak with Grand Zealot Richter, and you can find out that the Grand Zealot was formerly known as Brian Richter, and he served as a former lieutenant in the Enclave. He doesn't really say much else about the Enclave itself, but he talks about how his recon team got locked in a containment cellar, and of course he was able to survive, and is now a member of the Children of Adam. The only other thing I can think of are the Enclave iBots that patrol the Commonwealth. Presumably, these iBots were used by the Enclave to spread their propaganda, and are now silent given the fact that the Enclave in the Capital Wasteland was defeated. Otherwise, there's not really a whole lot of mention about the Enclave in Fallout 4, and today I want to discuss some notable circumstances where it seems like Bethesda is actively retconning the Enclave out of existence, and also how I feel like not including the Enclave in Fallout 4 or any of its DLC was a missed opportunity. So I guess we'll just discuss. As you may know, the Enclave is generally credited with developing several different technologies in the Fallout universe. Most notably, the Enclave was known for developing the line of advanced power armors, which include the Mark I, or aka the X01 power armor in Fallout 4, and they also made the advanced power armor Mark II, aka the Enclave power armor from Fallout 3, and the Hellfire power armor, which was also from Fallout 3. The Enclave traditionally is also credited with finishing VERTIBIRD technology, which began development before the war but seems to have been completed by the Enclave according to Fallout 3. VERTIBIRDs gave the Enclave an edge over the Wastelands factions, including the Brotherhood of Steel. It's also believed that the Enclave had the ability to mass-produce both advanced power armor and vertibirds. Beyond that, the Enclave was able to further improve, refine, and develop their own technology, and they had the scientific resources and know-how to develop biological weapons, as we saw in Fallout 3 with the modified FEV that the player can put into Project Purity, and thus wipe out everyone in the Capital Wasteland. While they were defeated, the Enclave was a force to be reckoned with, and they were responsible for a lot of the advanced tech that we see in the previous games. And then Fallout 4 happened. For those of you that have played Fallout 4's NUKA World DLC, you come to find out that the X01 power armor, which was the advanced power armor that was originally developed by the Enclave in Fallout 2, is now a pre-war set of power armor that was developed by the US military before the bombs started to drop. The evidence for this is both in the power armor display case in Galactic Zone, as well as Brad Burton's office terminal. And as for the other two sets of power armor that the Enclave developed, it's unknown what happened to them, as they don't appear in Fallout 4. Presumably, they are still confirmed as being developed by the Enclave, but we just don't know. There's also Vertibird technology. In Fallout 3, it was established that Vertibird tech was in the early prototype stages, and the US military at the time expected Vertibirds to be fully deployed and ready to use by 2085. However, in Fallout 4, the pre-war military seems to have already developed Vertibirds, as the sole survivors seize them as they are running to Vault 111 to escape nuclear annihilation. There's a theory going around that the vertibirds we see in Fallout 4 are earlier models of the vertibirds that we see in Fallout 2 and Fallout 3. The idea being that there were pre-war vertibirds and there were also Enclave vertibirds, and that both the Fallout 2 and Fallout 3 vertibirds are the more recent model that was finished by the Enclave. And whether that's the case or not, it undermines the Enclave's role in finishing vertibird technology's development. Fallout 3 gives us the impression that vertibirds were conceptualized pre-war, but they weren't used until the post-war era when the Enclave finished the technology. What I think is depressing about both of these cases is that it undermines and essentially rewrites the lore to suggest that the Enclave didn't pioneer any of the technological accomplishments that they're known for. The Enclave didn't develop Exo-1 power armor, they just borrowed it from the former US military. Vertibirds? Oh yeah, the pre-war military had those too. In a way, it portrays the Enclave as incompetent and that they just inherited a bunch of super experimental pre-war tech as opposed to actually developing anything that was really useful themselves. Yeah, I guess they still have both the Mark II and the Hellfire power armor, but when you think about the Enclave, you think of the Exo-1 or Advanced power armor complete with their vertibirds. Speaking of power armor, Bethesda seems to have undermined the Enclave Tesla armor as well. While it existed in different forms in Fallout 1, 2, and Tactics, I believe Tesla power armor was adapted by the Enclave first, as it didn't appear on pre-war power armors. Well, at least until Fallout 4's Automatron DLC, where you can acquire T-60 Tesla armor. Now, I know the Mark II Tesla armor doesn't make an official appearance in Fallout 4, let alone the regular Mark II power armor. But at the same time, it seems like Bethesda could have at least made the Tesla power armor that appears in Automatron an Exo-1 variant as opposed to a T-60 variant. And I think that would have made a lot more lore sense since the Enclave were the only faction we knew of that had Tesla power armor variants. Now, I know the Enclave has really taken a number of blows since Fallout 2 and Fallout 3. After all, the Control Station Enclave from Fallout 2 was destroyed, and both Raven Rock and the mobile crawler were blown up in Fallout 3. At the same time, one thing I really liked about New Vegas was that you could find Enclave remnants from the West Coast Enclave, and you could interact with them and even convince them to fight alongside you, whether you decided to be with the NCR or Caesar's Legion at the very end of New Vegas during the Battle of Hoover Dam. Plus, we also know that there are some Enclave remnants during the events of Fallout 4, as it's only been 10 years since the events of Fallout 3, and about 6 since the events of New Vegas. Far Harbor, of course, featured Richter, who, for all intents and purposes, is an Enclave remnant. But in general, though, it's surprising that we didn't encounter any more Enclave in either Fallout 4 Vanilla or any of its DLC. There isn't even a quest related to the Enclave, like there was in Fallout New Vegas, and it could be assumed that after the events of Fallout 3's Broken Steel DLC, the remaining Enclave forces were being hunted down by Brotherhood soldiers. Perhaps there are some hiding out in the Commonwealth or in other parts of post-war America. What would have been really interesting or really cool is if there was an NPC you can encounter after the Brotherhood came to the Commonwealth that's freaking out about the Brotherhood's arrival. And I think it would have even been better if there was a specific companion that's worried about Brotherhood soldiers finding them and executing them because of their former allegiances. And as the player, you could choose to turn this companion over to the Brotherhood, hide him or her, or if you've allied with either the Railroad or the Institute, you could bring this companion along while completing Rocket's Red Glare or Airship Down respectively. And really, to a certain extent, I'm surprised that Far Harbor didn't include 2 companions, as Richter could have served as an opposite to Old Longfellow from the DLC. Having him as a companion could have possibly provided players and fans with insight into what happened to the Enclave during the 10 years between Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. After playing Far Harbor, I was thinking that we might see the Enclave to some capacity in NUKA World. Even looking back on the DLC, they did make some references to Fallout 2's ghosts in the form of Lucy Grantchester, and they also made a reference to the Hubologists, who were first introduced in Fallout 2. It's just strange that the Enclave, who were also introduced in Fallout 2, make no appearances in the NUKA World DLC. And the worst part about NUKA World, though, is that they retconned the Enclave's iconic power armor. And while I get why Bethesda did it, since Quantum Exo-1 would be a better reward than Quantum T-60, it's sad that Bethesda retconned the lore this way. This will sound weird, but it seems like the Enclave should be at or involved with NUKA World, particularly when it comes to the Galactic Zone and some of its areas. According to some of the design documents for Black Isle Studios' version of Fallout 3, which I guess was originally going to be called Van Buren, the Enclave's original goal was not to recolonize the Earth, but to colonize space in order to escape the coming nuclear war. In the NUKA World DLC, we find out that Vault-Tec was involved in the Among the Stars display, where they showed a hypothetical vault called Arcturus 1 that could feasibly exist on moons in outer space, perhaps on moons beyond our solar system. On the one hand, maybe this is insignificant, but I'd be surprised if the Enclave wasn't involved with this somehow. It seems like they would be, since the Enclave did have a role in the Vault experiment according to previous games, and they had the desire to colonize space at one point. This could have been a great opportunity for Bethesda to let us know more about the Enclave, and instead we get the EXO-1 retcon. Now, I've been pretty critical of Bethesda in this particular video for not including the Enclave very much in Fallout 4. On the one hand, I think it's somewhat fair to be critical of Bethesda's retcons to both vertibirds and advanced power armor. On the other hand, we do also need to consider the Enclave's current status in the Wasteland and how they've been suffering a lot of losses. In Fallout 2, the Enclave lose Control Station Enclave, and New Vegas, it's confirmed that they eventually lose Navarro. In the case of the West Coast Enclave forces, many of the former soldiers consist of old men and women, and children that were in the Enclave, like Arcade Gannon, are now fully fledged adults. While we don't know the exact ages of some of these specific NPCs, Fallout 2 occurs in 2241. And since Fallout New Vegas is roughly 40 years after the events of Fallout 2, and assuming characters like Daisy Whitman, Orion Moreno, Cannibal Johnson, and Judah Krieger were in their 20s or 30s at the time of Fallout 2, the majority of them would be in their 60s or 70s by now. By Fallout 4, some of these characters are going to be pushing 80, provided that they weren't killed during the Battle of Hoover Dam or didn't die of natural causes. So as far as the West Coast Enclave remnants are concerned, many of the Enclave personnel from Fallout 2 would be pushing their 80s, and they're either dead or they lack the motivation and resources to resurrect the Enclave to what it was. In general, old NPCs with white hair are fairly uncommon throughout the Fallout games. Sure, there are a few here and there, but for the most part, you don't really see that many. In Fallout 3, the Enclave was defeated twice. First, Raven Rock was destroyed, which served as their primary headquarters after the destruction of the oil rig about 35 years prior. Then after that, the Brotherhood of Steel attacks the Enclave at Adams Air Force Base, where their mobile crawler is located, and based on some of what we know in Fallout 4, the mobile crawler was presumably destroyed. On the one hand, while the former East Coast Enclave personnel, like Brian Richter, aren't that old, and would certainly still be around by the end of Fallout 4, key leaders like Augustus Autumn would be in his mid-60s, and that's assuming he survived his confrontation with the Lone Wanderer in Fallout 3. Depending on when the next Fallout takes place, Colonel Autumn will be about as old as many of the West Coast Enclave remnants are. We also know that the Enclave was very isolationist and didn't take any new recruits. Let's say the Enclave at most consisted of about 1,000 to 2,000 individuals in Fallout 3. Let's also say that about 200 to 400 Enclave personnel managed to survive the destruction of both Raven Rock and the mobile crawler. If the New Vegas remnants are any indication, most of the survivors would have split up and tried to integrate with the local population. Even in the best case scenario, where Colonel Autumn manages to survive Project Purity and relocates elsewhere, it's going to be a long time before the Enclave is back up to fighting strength. They may even face problems that the West Coast Brotherhood has, since neither faction seems to be willing to recruit Wastelanders to their cause. Given that the East Coast Brotherhood does recruit new soldiers, and they are actively hunting the Enclave down, they are going to have a tough time going forward. Now, does Bethesda hate the Enclave? Ultimately, I don't think they really do. Otherwise, I don't think the Enclave would have made it into Fallout 3 and even some of its DLC. Depending on how you look at it, Fallout 2's West Coast Enclave remnants were in a really bad place, and it didn't seem like they would be able to recover from the loss of Control Station Enclave. Bethesda ultimately brought them back from the dead and made them into Fallout 3's primary antagonists. At the same time, you've got to wonder about some of those Fallout 4 retcons though. While you could argue the changing of some of the lore behind vertibirds isn't really that big of a deal, I think retconning the Enclave's iconic power armor is definitely a cause for concern. Plus, when you consider how the Enclave are barely mentioned in Fallout 4 and its DLC, it could make you think that Bethesda is seemingly avoiding the Enclave for some reason. Who knows, maybe future Fallout games will feature the Enclave a lot more. And if you think about it, Fallout 2 and Fallout 3 take place about 30 to 40 years apart, which would be enough time for a new generation of Enclave to be born and trained. I just hope we get to see the Enclave again, even if it's just a group of remnants that managed to survive the destruction of Raven Rock and the mobile crawler in Fallout 3. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what the future holds. Alright guys, that's going to wrap up this particular video. If you like this video, please be sure to leave a like, and as always, take care, and I'll see y'all next time.